3. This video is on GDP, gross domestic product, but it's looking at how to calculate GDP via the AQA specification for A-level. So in AQA, you've got papers 2 and 3, which may bring up GDP calculations. Paper 2 is your macroeconomics paper, and paper 3 has your 30 multiple choice questions, and it is very, very common, or it's very commonly used within multiple choice. So I'm going to break it down into green, amber and red in terms of challenge. So I'll give you an idea of how it is questioned. Some of them are much more accessible than others, so hence why the colour code in terms of that difficulty. So to start off with, what we're going to do is look at components, and this is via aggregate demand. So we've got all the components of the aggregate demand formula, as we can see here. So we've got consumption, we've got investment, we've got government expenditure, and we've got exports and imports to allow us to see net exports. So again, all we can do is just show this by the formula. So we've got 850 billion plus our 180 billion plus our 300 billion plus our net exports of 230 minus 210. And if you add them all together, what you'll get is B. Now the next question, again it's very, very similar, but it's slightly more tricky, but it's still a green question in terms of accessibility. And what we've got this time is we've actually been given aggregate demand, but what we've not been given is our exports. So again, we can use the formula as before. So our 500 billion plus our 50 billion plus our 250 billion, but now we're trying to find out net exports and we haven't got exports. We're looking for exports, but we have got imports of 50 billion, that's meant to say. And we know our aggregate demand is 825 billion. So let's just rearrange the formula. So we'll do our 825 billion minus our 500 billion plus our 50 billion plus our 250 billion, and what that will tell us is our net exports is 25 billion. But we're not looking for our net exports in this, we're looking for our exports. So if we know our imports is 50 billion, then all we simply have to do is add that 25 billion onto the imports, and that'll get us 75 billion. So again, just do the formula, 75 billion minus 50 billion, and that'll get us the net exports of 25 billion. Right, our next question in terms of amber, the reason why I've considered this to be amber is because it's bringing in index numbers now. But the index numbers are still pretty straightforward because it's just looking at real GDP, and that is it. Nothing, no other components are being brought in. So we know our base year is 2016, so that is going to be 100. And we know that the real GDP in 2015 was less than it was in 2016. So actually it's going to be less than 100. So straight away we can rule out C and we can rule out D. So all we simply have to do in this is a percentage change. Our percentage change though is going to consider 2015 as our new amount because we're looking at that as our point of comparison to that of 2016. So we do our 31 minus 35 divided by 35, and that'll get us minus 0.11. Obviously we turn it into a percentage, and that gives us 11%. Now we have to convert it into an index, so we simply get our 100 minus 11, and that gets us 89, which the answer is A. Another similar question, and again it's amber because we're only looking at real GDP. This time it's telling us the base year is in 2013, so again we put that to 100. And what we're looking at is the difference between that and 2016, where it's the real GDP is £271 billion. So all we simply need to do is again a calculation change. So our 271 minus 215 divided by 215, and that gets us 0.26. Times that by 100, and we've got 26%. If we convert that into an index, then we simply need to do 100 plus 26, and that gets us 126. So the economy is grown in real terms by 26%. Right, the next one is red, and the reason why it's red is because we've got a new component now. We've not only got the index at GDP at current prices, but we've also got a price index, which makes it more challenging. Now, pretty much what we're looking at is nominal versus real GDP. So your nominal is the market value of the final production of goods and services within a country in a given period evaluated at current market prices. However, real GDP is the market value of the final production of goods and services within a country in a given period adjusted for price changes that may have occurred over time. So if we're thinking about, for example, GDP, and we're looking at the quantity of goods. Now, if the quantity has risen, and only the quantity has risen, then we're looking at it in terms of real GDP will have risen. But what happens if there's been inflation at the same time and the price level of these goods have also risen? Now, we'll see that our nominal GDP has increased, but we also have to look at it in real terms as to what is the biggest change in the value. Is it the quantity or is it actually the price? And that is where real GDP comes into account. So what we need to do in this question, we need to deflate by the price index growth to put GDP in the same prices as 2007, and that's the challenge. So pretty much what we're looking at is constant versus current prices. Now there's two ways we can do this. So I'm going to show you this way and then I'm going to show you again in another way. So first of all we'd simply do is we'd have to work out our nominal GDP because we'd have to see if B and D are an option. So if we did our 130 minus our 80 divided by 80, and that'll get us 62.5. Sorry, that's not meant to say a percentage sign of 162.5 because that's an index, so it should be just 162.5 because nominal GDP has risen by 62.5%. That means that it cannot be B and it cannot be D. Because nominal GDP rose by 50%, well we know that's not true because it's 62.5%. Nominal GDP rose by less than 50%, well obviously not, it's more than 50%. So we can rule out B and D straight away. So then what we have to do is the following. So we have to get our 130 in 2013, and we have to remember that that is at current prices, so it's already taken into account the inflationary growth. But what we do have to do with it is we have to reverse it to find it in constant prices, and we have to reverse it to look at it in terms of the prices of 2007. So how we do that is we go 130 and we divide it by 110, and then we times it by the 2007 price of 80, and that will get us 94.5. Then all we have to simply do is work out a percentage change with our 2007 GDP, and that's 94.5 minus 80 divided by 80 equals 18.2%. So again, the answer would be C. Now the other way of doing this is the following. So what we can do is we can use this formula where it's the index of nominal GDP divided by the index of price level times by 100. So what again you can do, we've worked out our nominal GDP and it's risen by 62.5%, so that's the index number of 162.5. So that's part of the formula, but we also have to do our price level. So if we do our 110 minus 80 divided by 80, and then what we'll see is that inflation has risen by 37.5%, because the index is going to be 137.5. And then we'd simply need to do the formula. So 162.5 divided by 137.5 times by 100 gets us 118.2. So again, it's risen by 18.2%. So therefore we know again the answer is C. It's less than 50%. Now the next one, this time we've got population. So not only have we got GDP at current prices and price index, but we've got a third one, which is population. So we can work out the real GDP per capita. Hence why it's red with an extra challenge. So all we need to do is we could get our 200 divided by 20, which again 20 million being the population, and that gets us 10. We can do our 220 and divide it by 22, and that gets us 10. But that is in nominal terms, and we have to take into account the prices. So what we can do is we can get our 10 divided by 110, which was the price index in year 2, and then we can times it by the price in year 1, which is 100, and that gets us 9.09. So that means the real GDP per capita has fallen. It's fallen from 10 to 9.09, and that is in real terms. Now another one which is quite similar to this. So Before I do anything, and before I do a calculation similar to the last question, I'm just going to look at option C, where it says population grew at a faster percentage rate than the prices. Now I can quickly work that out because I know the prices have gone from 100 to 110, so there's been a 10% increase. So all I simply need to do is just work out the population increase in terms of 2013 to 2012, and we can see there it's only increased by 5%. So it hasn't, so we can rule out C straight away. So let's have a look at what we can do with the others. So again, what we have to do is we have to get our 100 divided by 20, which gives us our GDP per capita of 5. Our 105, because we're looking at GDP at current prices in 2013, divided by 21, and that gets us 5. But we have to now take into consideration the prices. So what we do is we get our 5 divided by 110, which is the price in 2013, and we times it by the price in 2012, which is 100, and that gets us 4.55. Now we know in 2012 at the current prices it was at 5. So that means the real GDP per capita has fallen in 2013 to 4.55. Now, if the real GDP per capita has fallen, then that suggests that the real national income per head has fallen. So therefore, the answer is going to be D.